The chapel smelled like old wood and rain and something else, something stale and forgotten, like a room that hadn't been opened in years. I sat in the front pew, alone, staring at Mark's casket. Plain pine, brass handles that caught the dim light from the overhead fixtures, a single arrangement of white lilies I'd ordered myself because no one else had thought to send flowers. The priest stood at the pulpit, reading verses I couldn't hear over the drumming in my skull, over the sound of my own heartbeat pounding in my ears like a drum that wouldn't stop. Behind me, the pews were empty, every single one. 48 wooden benches stretched back toward the doors, and not a soul occupied them. I'd sent the text 3 days ago, called twice after that, left voicemails that went unanswered. Chloe had responded with, "So sorry, Mom, stuck in traffic, we'll try to make it." Lucas wrote back, "On my way, running late." That was 2 hours before the service started. 2 hours, plenty of time to get anywhere in this city, but apparently not enough time to say goodbye to their father. The priest's voice droned on. I caught fragments. Beloved husband, devoted father, man of integrity. Words that meant nothing now, bouncing off empty walls and disappearing into the silence. I wanted to laugh or scream. Instead, I sat perfectly still, hands folded in my lap, back straight, looking exactly like what everyone expected, the grieving widow, dignified and composed. I'd worn my black dress, the one I bought for Mark's mother's funeral 5 years ago. It still fit, though it felt tighter around the waist. Stress, probably. I hadn't eaten much in the past week, hadn't slept well either. The house was too quiet without him, too empty, and every time I closed my eyes, I saw him on the kitchen floor, clutching his chest, looking at me with eyes that said he knew this was it. This was the end. The priest finished. He closed his Bible with a soft thump that echoed through the chapel. Then he walked down from the pulpit, his shoes clicking on the tile floor, and touched my shoulder with one hand. His palm was warm through the fabric of my dress. "I'm sorry for your loss, Mrs. Harper," he said. I nodded, couldn't speak. If I opened my mouth, something might come out that I couldn't take back. He squeezed my shoulder once, then stepped away. The funeral director and his assistant appeared from a side door, both wearing identical dark suits and practiced expressions of sympathy. They wheeled the casket toward the exit, moving slowly, reverently, as if Mark could still feel their respect. I stood and followed, my heels clicking on the tile, the sound echoing in the cavernous space, making the emptiness even more obvious. Outside, the sky was grey and swollen with rain. The air smelled like wet asphalt and cut grass from somewhere nearby. The funeral home's small parking lot had maybe 6 cars, mine, the hearse, the priest's sedan, and a couple that probably belonged to staff. The casket slid into the back of the hearse with a metallic scrape. Rain started as they closed the doors, fat drops that splattered on the pavement and the hood of my car. I stood under the funeral home's awning, watching water begin to pool in the parking lot's low spots. My phone buzzed in my purse. I pulled it out. "Chloe, Mum, I'm so sorry, couldn't get away. You understand, right? Love you." Lucas, got pulled into emergency meeting. We'll visit grave tomorrow, promise. Tomorrow. Sure. Tomorrow they'd have another excuse. And the day after that, and the day after that. I'd heard every variation over the past 3 years, ever since they'd both graduated and moved on to their important lives, with their important jobs and their important friends. Before we go any further, take a second to subscribe, hit the hype button, and like the video. It really helps the channel grow. And tell us in the comments, what would you do in this situation? I type back to both of them. It's okay, I understand. Because what else could I say? What else had I ever said? The funeral director approached, holding a black umbrella. "Mrs. Harper, we're ready to proceed to the cemetery whenever you are." "I'm ready," I said. I drove alone, following the hearse through streets I'd driven 1,000 times. Past the grocery store, where Mark and I shopped every Saturday, past the park where we'd taken the kids when they were small, pushing them on swings, catching them at the bottom of slides, past the coffee shop where Mark met his reading group every Tuesday morning. All these places, suddenly hollow, markers of a life that was over. The cemetery sat on a hill at the edge of town, surrounded by old oak trees that had probably been there 100 years. The graves stretched in neat rows across the slope, some marked with elaborate headstones, others with simple flat markers. They'd picked a spot near the back, under one of those oak trees. Nice view, the funeral director had said when we'd made the arrangements, as if Mark would care about the view. The hearse stopped on the narrow access road. I parked behind it and got out. The rain had settled into a steady drizzle, cold and penetrating. I opened my umbrella and walked to the graveside. They'd set up a small green tent over the hole, but it didn't help much. Water dripped from its edges, and the ground underneath was already muddy. The funeral director and his assistant unloaded the casket and set it on the lowering device. The mechanism looked old, painted green to match the fake grass they'd rolled out around the grave. The priest said a few more words, something about ashes and dust and eternal rest. I barely heard him. I was watching the casket, thinking about Mark inside it, wearing the grey suit I'd picked out, hands folded across his chest the way the funeral home had arranged them. They lowered him into the ground. The straps creaked. The casket disappeared into the earth slowly, inch by inch, until it settled at the bottom with a sound I felt more than heard, a finality that made my chest tight. "Would you like to stay, Mrs. Harper?" the funeral director asked. "Yes. We'll be nearby if you need anything." He and his assistant walked back to the hearse. The priest nodded to me and left. I stood under my umbrella, alone again, watching the cemetery workers begin to fill the grave. They worked methodically, shoveling dirt onto the casket, the sound of earth hitting wood sharp and brutal. I stayed until they'd finished, until the hole was filled and the dirt was packed down smooth and level with the ground around it. When I finally turned to leave, my shoes squelched in the mud. I got back to my car and sat in the driver's seat without turning on the engine. Rain drummed on the roof, steady and monotonous. I turned on the radio for something to fill the silence. The weather report said it would rain through the night, possibly into tomorrow morning. Flood warnings in the low areas. I turned off the radio, rested my hands on the steering wheel, and stared through the windshield at the cemetery, at all the stones marking lives that had ended, lives that were already fading from memory. At my husband's funeral, no one came but me. My children chose parties over their father's goodbye. The next morning, I stopped being their mother. The house was too quiet when I got home. It had always been quiet since the kids moved out, but Mark had filled the silence with his presence. The sound of him moving through rooms, humming while he made coffee, calling out to ask where I'd put his reading glasses. Now there was nothing. Just the hum of the refrigerator and the creak of floorboards under my feet. Mark's coffee mug still sat on the counter, half full, a ring of dried foam around the rim. I'd left it there since the morning he collapsed, 6 days ago, Monday morning, 7:45. He'd been drinking coffee and reading the news on his tablet when his face went pale, and he grabbed his chest. I'd called 911, but it didn't matter. By the time the ambulance arrived, he was gone. I picked up the mug now, held it in both hands. The ceramic was cold. The coffee inside had long since gone stale, formed a thin film on top. I could smell it, sour and wrong. But I couldn't wash it out, couldn't throw it away. It was the last thing he'd touched before he died. I set it back down exactly where it had been. On the kitchen table, I found an envelope that hadn't been there when I left for the funeral. Someone had been in the house. I picked it up, turned it over. No writing on the outside. Inside, a stack of bills rubber-banded together and a handwritten note from Chloe on pink stationery with flowers printed in the corners. "Mom, you don't mind we sold Dad's car, right? It was just sitting there, and Lucas needed the money for his startup thing. We figured you wouldn't need 2 cars anyway. Hope the funeral was nice. Love you. XOXO. I read it once, then again, then a third time, my eyes moving over the same words, trying to make them mean something different than what they clearly meant. They'd sold his car, hadn't asked, hadn't waited until after the funeral, hadn't even mentioned it until it was done. Just took his keys, probably from the hook by the door where he always hung them, drove his car away, signed whatever papers needed signing, took the cash and split it between them. Hope the funeral was nice. Nice, like it was a party, like it was something pleasant they'd missed because they had better things to do. I folded the note carefully, creasing it along the original fold lines, put it back in the envelope, placed the envelope on the counter next to Mark's mug. Then I stood there, staring at both of them. These artifacts of a life that was over. The bills were utility statements, credit card payments, the mortgage, all the normal things that don't stop just because someone dies. I'd have to go through them, figure out what needed to be paid, what accounts needed to be closed, what paperwork needed to be filed, all the bureaucratic aftermath of him being gone. But not now. Not yet. I grabbed my keys from the hook, the same hook where Mark's had hung until my children stole them, and drove back to the cemetery. The rain had stopped, but everything was wet. The sky was still grey, threatening more. I parked in the same spot I'd used earlier and walked across the grass to Mark's grave. My shoes sank into the soft ground with each step, mud sucking at my heels. The grave was just a mound of dirt now, darker than the surrounding earth because it was fresh, packed down by the workers, but still loose and uneven. The temporary marker was a small metal stake with a plastic placard attached, Mark's name printed in simple black letters. Nothing elegant, nothing permanent. The real headstone would take weeks to order and install. I'd picked out a simple design, his name, his dates, beloved husband and father. Generic words that didn't capture anything about who he was. But what else do you put on a stone? I'd stopped at the grocery store on the way and bought flowers from the display near the front. Cheap plastic ones in garish colours, bright pink, electric blue, sunshine yellow, wrapped in cellophane that crinkled when I pulled them out of the passenger seat. They'd been sitting in a bucket of water by the checkout, probably for days or weeks, never meant to be bought, just decoration. I unwrapped them and stuck the stems into the mud next to the marker. They looked ridiculous, fake and bright against all that brown earth, the green grass around the grave, the grey sky overhead. But they were something, better than nothing, better than the absence that Chloe and Lucas had left. "I'm sorry," I whispered. "They didn't come, Mark. They didn't even try." The wind picked up, cold against my wet face. I hadn't realized I was crying until then, until I felt the tears cool on my cheeks. I wiped them away with the back of my hand. "I don't know what I did wrong," I said to the mound of dirt, to the man underneath it who couldn't hear me anymore. "I gave them everything I had, and they couldn't give you 1 hour, 1 goddamn hour to say goodbye." My voice broke on the last word. I stood there, fists clenched at my sides, breathing hard, trying not to fall apart completely. Not here, not in public where someone might see. After a while, I don't know how long, I walked back to my car. Sat in the driveway at home for 20 minutes before I could make myself go inside. When I finally did, I went straight to the bedroom, opened Mark's closet, and pressed my face into his shirts. They still smelled like him. Like the detergent I used, yes. But underneath that, something that was purely Mark. Soap and coffee, and something warm I couldn't name. Something that was just the scent of his skin, his presence, him. I pulled a flannel shirt off its hanger and held it against my chest. Stood there in the closet, surrounded by his clothes, his shoes lined up on the floor, his belt hanging on the inside of the door. When you raise children who treat you like staff, you start counting disappointments, not years. I'd been counting for a long time now. 3 years since Chloe forgot my birthday. 2 years since Lucas visited for Christmas and spent the entire time on his phone. 18 months since either of them called just to talk, not to ask for something. 6 months since they'd visited Mark in the hospital after his first heart attack, stayed for 20 minutes, and left because they had dinner reservations. I closed the closet door and walked to the window. Looked out at the street, at the neighbor's house where lights were on, and I could see people moving inside. A family, together, living their ordinary evening. Across the street, the tree Mark had planted when Lucas was born stood tall now, thick-trunked, branches spreading wide enough to shade half the yard. Lucas had been 7 pounds, 6 ounces. Mark had planted that sapling the day we brought him home from the hospital, said it would grow up strong like his son. The tree had kept its promise. Lucas hadn't. They cut me off, I thought, cut me out of their lives except when they needed something. Money, advice, permission to sell their father's car while he was still warm in the ground. I will cut them off, from me and everything they ever relied on. 2 weeks passed in a haze of forms and phone calls, certificates verifying he was gone, insurance paperwork, insurance claims, bank accounts, lawyers, the mortgage company, credit card companies, all of them demanding proof that Mark was gone, asking for documents, signatures, time I didn't have. I took a leave from work, 3 weeks, maybe 4. They were understanding. I'd worked at the hospital for 23 years, never missed a day unless absolutely necessary. They could spare me for a few weeks. Chloe called twice, both times to ask about the will. When would it be read? What had Mark left? Did I need help with anything? By which she meant, did I need help finding the important documents so she could get her share faster? Lucas called once, left a voicemail. Hey Mom, just checking in. Let me know about Dad's life insurance whenever you get a chance. No rush or anything. No rush. Right, I didn't call either of them back. On a Thursday afternoon, 2 weeks and 3 days after the funeral, I was at work in the hospital break room during my lunch shift. I'd gone back after the first week because sitting at home alone was worse than being around people. At least at work I had things to do, routines to follow, tasks that filled the hours and kept me from thinking too much. Someone turned on the TV mounted in the corner. Local news. Usually we kept it on the Weather Channel, or turned off entirely, but Janet wanted to see if they'd mentioned the new hospital wing they were building, some big donor thing she'd read about online. They weren't talking about the hospital. They were doing a segment on young entrepreneurs in the city, up-and-coming business owners making a difference in the community. And there was Chloe, standing next to her husband Brian, in what looked like their downtown office, both of them wearing expensive suits and smiling like magazine cutouts. Behind them, an open floor plan with glass walls and modern furniture, everything chrome and white and aggressively trendy. We really believe in family values, Chloe said, her voice bright and practiced. She touched Brian's arm, a gesture so calculated I could see the coaching behind it. That's what drives everything we do. My parents taught me that. They showed me what it means to put family first, to sacrifice for the people you love. That's the foundation of our business model. Treating our clients like family, being there for them no matter what. My parents, plural, present tense, as if Mark were still alive, as if she'd seen him recently, as if she gave a damn about family values or sacrifice, or being there for anyone other than herself. Janet glanced at the screen, then at me. Hey, isn't that your daughter? Yeah, I said. My voice came out flat, emotionless. Oh, wow, she's so polished. You must be so proud. Janet smiled, that bright, enthusiastic smile people use when they think they're saying something nice. She's really made something of herself, hasn't she? She sure has, I said. And that office? Very impressive. What kind of business are they in? Marketing, social media management, something like that. I poured my coffee slowly, carefully, watching the dark liquid fill the cup. On the TV, Chloe was still talking, something about innovative strategies and customer engagement. Her voice made my teeth hurt. "She got your looks," Janet said. "And your work ethic, I bet. She obviously didn't just coast into that success." I smiled, nodded, didn't trust myself to say anything else. Picked up my coffee cup and walked out of the break room, down the hall, past the nurse's station, past patient rooms where people were sick and dying and fighting for every breath, into the bathroom at the end of the hall where I locked myself in a stall and breathed. In through the nose, out through the mouth. 5 times, 10, 15, until my hands stopped shaking, until I could unclench my jaw, until I could hear something other than Chloe's voice saying, "My parents taught me that," to a camera while her father rotted in the ground and she hadn't shed a single tear. When I came out of the stall, I looked at myself in the mirror. 56 years old, grey streaks in my brown hair that I'd stopped dyeing because Mark liked them, said they made me look distinguished. Lines around my eyes and mouth from decades of smiling, caring, giving. I looked tired. I looked old. I looked like someone who'd spent her whole life taking care of other people and had nothing to show for it except an empty house and children who thought family values meant showing up when there was money involved. I took my hospital badge off my chest, where I'd worn it clipped to my scrubs for 23 years, tucked it into my pocket instead. I didn't want anyone else recognizing Chloe and making the connection, asking me about her, telling me how proud I must be. I didn't want to be connected to her at all. That afternoon after my shift ended, I sat in my car in the parking lot and watched people come and go. Doctors, nurses, technicians, patients and their families, all of them with their own lives, their own problems, their own betrayals and disappointments. Did they feel like this? Like everything they'd built had been a lie? Like the people they'd loved most had used them up and thrown them away? I drove home on autopilot, barely seeing the road. Pulled into my driveway and sat there for 10 minutes before going inside. The house was dark. I didn't turn on any lights. Just sat on the couch in the living room, in the dark, listening to the silence. Mark's presence was fading. I could feel it. The house didn't smell like him anymore. His coffee mug had finally been washed. I'd had to, couldn't stand looking at it anymore. His clothes still hung in the closet, but they just smelled like fabric now, like nothing. The spaces he'd occupied were becoming just spaces again, empty and meaningless. But something else was growing in that emptiness, something cold and clear and hard. They made me the joke, the nice mom, the helpful mom. The mom who always understood, who always forgave, who always cleaned up their messes and paid their bills and asked for nothing in return except maybe a phone call once in a while, maybe a visit, maybe some basic human decency. Now I'll make them the shame. It started small. It had to. I wasn't stupid. I wasn't going to do anything obvious, anything that could be traced back to me. I was just a grieving widow, after all. A sad old woman who'd lost her husband and was trying to hold herself together. That's what everyone saw. That's what I needed them to keep seeing. 3 weeks after the funeral, Chloe called. Actually called, not texted. "Mum, finally got you. How are you doing?" "I'm fine, sweetie," I said, using the voice I'd perfected over decades of parenting. Warm, understanding, just a little bit tired. Just been busy with all the arrangements. "Oh, I know, it's so much work. I wanted to help, but things have been crazy at the office. You saw us on TV, right?" "I did. You looked beautiful." "Thanks. So listen, Brian and I are having this event next week, kind of a launch party for our new service package, and I was thinking maybe you could come. It would mean so much to have you there." Would it? I doubted that, but I said, "Of course, honey. I'd love to." "Perfect. It's Friday at 7, at that new venue downtown, the Glass House. You know where that is?" "I'll find it." "Great. Oh, and Mom, could you maybe bring that bottle of wine Dad had been saving? The fancy French one. I know he would have wanted to share it with us, you know, to celebrate." The wine. The Bordeaux Marc bought on our 30th anniversary, said we'd open it on our 40th. That wine. Sure, I said. I can bring that. You're the best. Love you. She hung up before I could respond. I went to the basement where Mark kept his wine collection. Nothing fancy, just a small rack he'd built himself, maybe 20 bottles total. Most of them were ordinary. $10 reds we'd drink with dinner. But the Bordeaux sat in the middle, a 2005 Chateau something or other that had cost him $200. He'd been so proud of it, showed it to me like it was a treasure. Told me the story of the vineyard, the vintage, what year would be perfect for drinking it. I pulled it out carefully, looked at the label, then I opened it, poured half the wine down the sink, and filled the bottle back up with cheap red from a box in the pantry. Corked it again. The seal was broken, but I could play that off. Oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't realize. I must have grabbed the wrong bottle. But that wasn't the real plan. The real plan was simpler. I took the bottle upstairs, wrapped it in tissue paper, and placed it in a gift bag. Then I took a ballpoint pen and poked a tiny hole in the bag's bottom, so small you couldn't see it unless you were looking. Put the bag in my trunk and waited for Friday. The glass house was exactly what it sounded like, a modern venue with floor-to-ceiling windows and terrible parking. I arrived early, found Chloe setting up. She looked stressed, barking orders at catering staff, adjusting flower arrangements, checking her phone every 30 seconds. "Mom!" She hugged me quickly, smelling like expensive perfume. "You made it. Did you bring the wine?" "Right here." I held up the gift bag. "Perfect. Just set it by the bar. I'll have them open it for the toast." I walked toward the bar, letting the bag tilt slightly. The wine seeped through the tiny hole, dripping onto my hand, my sleeve, the floor. By the time I reached the bar, I'd left a trail of red droplets across the white marble floor. "Oh no," I said loudly enough for people to hear. "Oh, I'm so sorry, it's leaking." Chloe rushed over. Her face went pale when she saw the wine spreading across the marble, seeping toward a rack where her expensive display materials were set up. Poster boards with glossy photos, sample packages, promotional materials she'd probably spent days preparing. "Mom, what did you—" "I don't know. The bag must have torn." I held it up, looking confused and helpless. "Oh, honey, I'm so sorry. Let me help clean this up." But it was too late. The wine had reached the display materials, soaked into the bottom poster board, stained the white tablecloth underneath. One of the catering staff ran over with towels, but the damage was done. Red wine everywhere, reeking of cheap alcohol, making the whole area smell like a bar at closing time. Chloe's carefully constructed event, her perfect Instagram-ready launch party, now featured a prominent wine stain right in the center of the venue. "It's okay," she said through clenched teeth. "It's fine. We'll move things around." "I feel terrible," I said, and I did my best to sound it. "Let me pay for the cleaning." No, it's fine, really, just maybe go get some air, Mom. You look a little pale." I left, sat in my car and watched through the windows as Chloe and her staff scrambled to rearrange everything, to hide the stain, to salvage her perfect event. The party went on, but it was wrong now. Off-center, improvised. Not what she'd planned, not what she'd wanted. Small victory, but it felt good. 2 days later, I went back to Chloe's office. Told her I wanted to drop off some of Mark's old business books, thought maybe she could use them. She wasn't there, but her assistant let me in, showed me around while I made pleasant small talk about how proud I was, how impressive everything looked. "Oh, the bathroom's down that hall if you need it," the assistant said. I did, and on my way I passed the electrical panel in the utility closet. The door was open. Some contractor had been doing work earlier. I glanced inside, saw the breaker switches, each one labeled. Conference room, main office, reception, kitchen. I flipped the one labeled conference room halfway, not enough to trigger immediately, but enough to create a short. An intermittent problem that would be hard to diagnose, that would cause lights to flicker, computers to restart, equipment to malfunction. Then I went back out, thanked the assistant, and left. 3 days later, Chloe called me, frustrated. "Mum, the weirdest thing happened. We had this huge presentation, and right in the middle, all the power in the conference room just died. Computers, projector, everything. Made us look so unprofessional." "Oh no, that's terrible, honey. Did they figure out what caused it?" "Electrician said it was some kind of short circuit, but he couldn't find the source. Cost us $2,000 and we still don't know if it's fixed." "These old buildings," I said sympathetically. "Always something going wrong." "It's not an old building, it's brand new." "Well, sometimes new construction has issues too. I'm sure it'll be fine now." It wouldn't be. I knew that because I'd gone back the next day, using the key card Chloe had given me months ago for emergencies, flipped another breaker the same way. They'd spend weeks chasing this problem, thousands of dollars, looking like idiots to their clients every time something failed. A dumb old mom is the perfect disguise for a predator. Lucas was harder. He didn't have an office I could access, didn't throw events I could sabotage with spilled wine or electrical problems. He worked from home mostly, some tech startup thing he'd been launching for 2 years, with no actual product to show for it. He'd been borrowing money from Mark for a year before he died, always promising it was temporary, always swearing he'd pay it back as soon as the funding came through. The funding never came through. After Mark died, I'd gone through his papers more carefully. Found records of wire transfers to Lucas. $15,000, $22,000, $18,000. Small amounts by themselves, but they added up. Over $60,000 Mark had given our son, money we'd saved for retirement, for emergencies, for the life we were supposed to have together after I retired from the hospital. All gone. Funding Lucas's dream that wasn't going anywhere, but that wasn't even the worst part. The worst part was the credit card. One of Mark's cards, the one with my name as an authorized user. I'd found a statement in his desk drawer, dated 3 months before he died. $28,000 charged on it, purchases I didn't recognize, cash advances, transfers to business accounts, all authorized by Lucas, who'd apparently gotten his hands on the card information and used it as collateral for some business deal. The debt was in my name now. Mark being gone hadn't erased it. I was responsible for every cent Lucas had spent. I could have called him, could have confronted him directly. But that wasn't the plan. The plan was subtler than that. The plan was to let Lucas destroy himself. I started by visiting his office, not the home office where he worked, but the small commercial space he'd rented downtown to look legitimate, to have an address for his LLC that wasn't his apartment. I told him I was in the neighborhood, wanted to stop by and see how things were going. He was pleased, surprised. I almost never visited. We met for coffee at the cafe next door. "Business is really picking up," he said, showing me charts on his laptop. Numbers that looked impressive if you didn't know what they meant. "We're about to close this huge deal with a firm in Seattle. Should have the money by next month." "That's wonderful, honey," I said. "Your father would be so proud." He looked uncomfortable. "Yeah, I wish he'd gotten to see this all come together." "Me too." We talked for another hour, or rather, Lucas talked and I listened, nodding in the right places, asking the occasional question, playing the supportive mother who didn't understand business but was proud anyway. When I left, I hugged him goodbye and told him to stay in touch. Then I went back to the cafe and sat down with his secretary, a young woman named Amy, who'd been working for Lucas for 6 months. She was friendly, chatty, the kind of person who talked too much when she was nervous or trying to impress someone. "It must be exciting working for a startup," I said. "Oh, it is. Well, most of the time, when things are working." She laughed, a little forced. "Sometimes it's stressful, you know. Lucas is great, but he's very intense. I imagine there's a lot of pressure." "Yeah, especially lately. He's been really worried about this Seattle deal falling through. Says we need it or the company's in trouble. I'm sure he'll figure it out. He's very resourceful. He is, although... She hesitated, then leaned in closer, lowering her voice. Can I tell you something? Just between us? Of course. I'm a little worried about him. He's been taking things, like small things from the office, supplies, equipment. At first I thought maybe he was just bringing stuff home to work on, but he never brings it back. And yesterday I saw him leaving with one of the laptops we use for client presentations. He said he needed it for a meeting, but that meeting got cancelled and he still hasn't brought it back. I frowned, concerned. That does sound strange. Right, and there's money missing from petty cash. Not a lot, but enough that I noticed. I didn't want to say anything because he's the boss, but with his dad just passing and everything, I wonder if he's, stressed. Maybe not handling things well. Maybe, I said thoughtfully. Has anyone else noticed? I don't think so. It's just me in the office most days. But I don't know what to do. I don't want to get him in trouble, but if something's wrong... I appreciate you telling me, I said. Let me think about it. Maybe I can talk to him, see how he's really doing. Thank you, Mrs. Harper. I didn't know who else to talk to. I left the cafe feeling satisfied. I hadn't lied, hadn't made anything up. I'd just listened, sympathized, and let Amy's own observations lead her to conclusions. Now those observations were in the air, circulating in her mind, ready to become gossip the moment she felt anxious enough to share them with someone else. Which happened sooner than I expected. 3 days later, Lucas called me, angry. Did you say something to Amy? About me stealing? What? No, of course not. She's been acting weird all week, and now she's asking questions about the budget, about equipment inventory. Someone put something in her head. Lucas, I barely talked to her. We had coffee and she mentioned she was worried about you. That's all. I didn't say anything about stealing. Well, someone did because now she's talking to the investors, asking them if they know about missing equipment. Do you know what that does to my credibility? To the company? I'm sorry, I don't understand. Is there missing equipment? That's not the point. The point is she shouldn't be talking to investors without my permission. Maybe she's just trying to help. She's not helping, she's sabotaging me. Everyone already thinks I'm incompetent because the Seattle deal fell through. And now this? Jesus, Mum, I'm barely holding things together as it is. The Seattle deal fell through. Yeah, last week. They went with someone else. His voice cracked. I'm done. The company's done. I can't make payroll next month. The investors are pulling out. And now my own employee thinks I'm a thief. Lucas, I have to go. I'll talk to you later. He hung up. I sat holding my phone, staring at the blank screen. I did nothing. Just told the truth that wasn't there. Lucas showed up at my door 3 days later. I knew it was him from the way he pounded on it, aggressive and frantic. I looked through the peephole and saw him pacing on my front step, running his hands through his hair, muttering to himself. I opened the door. What have you done? He shouted, pushing past me into the house. What the hell have you done? Lucas, calm down. Don't tell me to calm down. He whirled around, face red, eyes wild. My business is destroyed. Amy quit and filed a complaint with the Better Business Bureau. The investors pulled out. I lost the office lease. And it's all because of you. I didn't do anything, I said quietly. I had coffee with Amy. That's all. That's ridiculous. Lucas slammed his fist on the table. Mark's mug jumped. You planned this. You're trying to take our inheritance. I didn't. You never supported me. Never. You and Dad always thought I was wasting my time, wasting his money. Well, guess what, Mom? I was trying. I was actually trying to build something and you sabotaged me. He grabbed a mug from the counter, one of the everyday ones, plain white ceramic, and threw it against the wall. It shattered, pieces scattering across the kitchen floor. Lucas! I stepped back, heart pounding. You're happy now, right? Happy that I failed? Happy that everything's falling apart? He advanced toward me, finger pointing. You couldn't stand that I was doing something Dad never did, that I was taking risks, being ambitious. You had to tear it down. Your father gave you $60,000, I said, and my voice was steel. $60,000 we saved for our retirement, and you spent it all on a business that never existed, on equipment you sold, on cash advances you pocketed. I was building something. You were stealing from him, from us. And when that wasn't enough, you used his credit card without permission, ran up $28,000 in debt that I'm now responsible for. His face went pale. I was going to pay it back. When? After he was gone and couldn't even ask for it? After you'd drained us completely? It was an investment. He would have understood if... He died waiting for you to visit. My voice rose, all the rage I'd been holding for weeks finally breaking through. He had a heart attack and spent 3 days in the hospital, and you visited once. Once, for 20 minutes, because you had better things to do. Lucas's jaw clenched. That's not fair. Fair? You want to talk about fair? Your father's funeral. You couldn't even show up. Too busy with your fake business and your fake meetings and your real theft. Shut up. He loved you. Despite everything, despite knowing you were using him, he loved you. And you let him die alone. Lucas grabbed my wrist, hard. His fingers dug into my skin and I gasped, tried to pull away, but he held on. You don't know anything, he hissed. You don't know what it's like to be me, to have everyone expect you to be something you're not. Dad never understood. Neither do you. Let go of me. Not until you admit what you did. Not until you tell me the truth. I looked at him, really looked at him. My son. 28 years old, 6 feet tall, strong enough to hurt me if he wanted to. But I saw something else too. Desperation. Fear. The look of someone who knows they're losing and doesn't know how to stop it. I grabbed the dish towel hanging on the oven handle with my free hand and threw it at his face. It wasn't heavy, wasn't dangerous, just a piece of fabric. But it startled him enough that he loosened his grip. I yanked my wrist free and shoved him backward. He stumbled, caught himself on the edge of the table. Get out, I said. Mum! Get out of my house. The neighbor's dog started barking outside. Then I heard Mrs. Patterson's voice, shrill and worried. Everything okay over there? Should I call someone? Lucas looked toward the window, then back at me. Fear replaced anger in his eyes. I didn't mean... Out! He grabbed his jacket from the chair where he'd thrown it and headed for the door. Mrs. Patterson was standing in my front yard now, phone in her hand. Other neighbors had come out too, drawn by the shouting. Is everything all right, Evelyn? Mrs. Patterson called. Lucas pushed past her, got in his car, and drove away too fast, tires screeching. Mrs. Patterson came to the door. Should I call the police? I heard yelling. No, I said, keeping my voice calm and steady despite my racing heart. We're fine, just a disagreement. Family stuff. Are you sure? I heard something break. Just a mug. Accident. Really, Mrs. Patterson, everything's fine. She looked skeptical but nodded. If you're sure, but I'm right next door if you need anything. I know, thank you. I closed the door and locked it, leaned against it, breathing hard. My wrist throbbed where Lucas had grabbed it. I could see the marks already forming, red impressions that would turn to bruises by morning. I walked to the kitchen and looked at the shattered mug on the floor. White pieces scattered across the tile, some as big as my palm, others reduced to powder. I got the broom and dustpan and swept it up methodically, every fragment, every shard, until the floor was clean again. Then I sat at the kitchen table and examined my wrist. The bruises were already darkening. 4 finger marks and a thumb, clear as a signature. Evidence. But I didn't call the police. Didn't call anyone. Just sat there, looking at the marks, feeling something cold and bright spreading through my chest. For the first time, I felt power not from fear, but from calm. That night I couldn't sleep. Lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying the scene with Lucas over and over. His face when he grabbed me, the sound of the mug shattering, Mrs. Patterson's worried voice, the dog barking, all of it looping in my head like a film I couldn't stop watching. At 2 a.m, I gave up and went downstairs, made chamomile tea I didn't drink, stood at the kitchen window, looking out at the dark street, the houses with their lights off, everyone else sleeping while I stood here alone. I needed to think, needed to plan what came next. Lucas would tell Chloe about the confrontation, probably a version that made him the victim and me the aggressor. Chloe would believe him because it was easier than believing her mother was capable of fighting back. They'd circle the wagons, present a united front. Poor Mum, losing it after Dad died, getting paranoid, starting to imagine things, unless I moved first. I went to Mark's office, the small room off the living room where he'd paid bills and managed our finances. I'd been avoiding it since he died, but now I turned on the light and started going through his filing cabinet systematically. Tax returns, insurance papers, mortgage documents, medical bills. There was a whole folder of them, stuffed fat with statements from the hospital, from specialists, from the pharmacy. I pulled it out and spread the papers across the desk. Some of them were stamped paid. Most of them were stamped overdue. Mark's first heart attack had been 18 months ago. Mild, the doctors said, manageable with medication and lifestyle changes. But he'd needed follow-up care, stress tests, monitoring, a cardiac rehabilitation program the insurance only partially covered. I found a letter from the rehab center, dated 6 months ago. This is a final notice that your account is past due in the amount of $8,120. If payment is not received within 30 days, your enrollment in the program will be terminated and your account will be sent to collections. Another letter from the cardiologist. We regret to inform you that due to outstanding balance of $6,200, we can no longer provide services until the account is brought current. More letters, more bills, a statement from the pharmacy showing prescriptions that hadn't been filled because the co-pays hadn't been paid. I sat down hard in Mark's chair. My hands were shaking. He'd stopped treatment, not because he wanted to, but because he couldn't afford it. Because the money he'd been saving for medical expenses had gone to Lucas. Because the credit card that should have been available for emergencies was maxed out by Lucas. Because our son had bled us dry, and Mark had been too proud or too stubborn or too loving to tell him no. I found a note in Mark's handwriting, tucked between 2 bills, just a few lines on a sticky note. Called Lucas about rehab payment, said he'd have it next month, told him not to worry. Next month never came. The rehab program cancelled his enrollment, his medication ran out, and 3 months later, he had another heart attack, the fatal one. The one who left him lying on our kitchen floor while I screamed into the phone and the 911 operator told me to stay calm. Help was coming, help was coming. Help came too late. I gathered all the bills, all the letters, all the evidence of what had really happened, put them in a folder. Then I kept searching, found bank statements showing the wire transfers to Lucas, found credit card statements showing charges that made no sense, luxury hotels, expensive restaurants, designer clothes. Lucas living large on borrowed money while his father couldn't afford his heart medication. Found an email Mark had printed out from Chloe, dated 4 months ago. Dad, I know you and Mom are struggling with bills right now, but Brian and I really need help with the down payment on the new office space. It's a huge opportunity for us, and the timing is perfect. Can you loan us $15,000? We'll pay you back as soon as the business picks up, promise. Love you. Mark had written in the margin. Told her no, she hung up on me. I stared at that margin note for a long time. Told her no, she hung up on him. And then what? Stopped calling, stopped visiting, punished him for not giving her what she wanted. I found the check register, Mark's careful handwriting logging every transaction. I flipped back through the months before he died. mortgage payment, utilities, groceries, and there, a check to Chloe for $15,000, dated 3 months ago, 1 month after the email where he'd told her no. He'd given in, given her the money anyway. Probably couldn't stand her being angry with him, couldn't bear the silence. $15,000 we didn't have. $15,000 that should have paid for his medication, his rehab program, his follow-up care. I closed the register and sat in the dark office, surrounded by evidence of my children's greed and the fact that my husband was gone. They let him die because it was easier, because asking for money was simpler than earning it, because taking was what they did and giving was what we did, and nobody ever questioned that arrangement until there was nothing left to give. I'll make their lives equally inconvenient. I sent the text messages on a Thursday morning, 1 week after Lucas showed up at my door. Same message to both of them. We need to talk about your father's estate and the inheritance. Saturday at 2 p.m. at the house. Be there. Chloe responded within minutes. Can't wait. See you then. Lucas took 3 hours. Fine. Saturday I cleaned the house, not because it was dirty. I'd been keeping it immaculate since Mark died, needing something to do with my hands, with my time. But I cleaned it again anyway. Vacuumed carpets that didn't need vacuuming. Dusted surfaces that had no dust. Scrubbed the kitchen sink until it gleamed. At 1 o'clock I set the dining room table. Not with plates or glasses, we wouldn't be eating. Instead, I laid out 3 chairs, positioned carefully. 2 on one side, facing the third. I put Mark's photo on the table, the one from our 30th anniversary, where he was smiling at the camera with his arm around my waist. Next to it, his favorite mug, the one with "World's Best Dad" that the kids had given him when they were small and still thought he was a hero. I arranged the folders in front of my chair, medical bills in one, bank statements in another, credit card statements in a third, the email and check register in a fourth, all the evidence organized and ready. Then I sat down and waited. Chloe arrived first at 1:55 p.m., driving her new BMW. She came in wearing white pants and a silk blouse, looking like she'd just left brunch at some expensive restaurant. Kissed my cheek, smelling like perfume that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. Hi, Mom, how are you? She looked around the living room taking inventory, probably calculating what everything was worth. The house looks great. Have you thought about what you're going to do with it? Because Brian and I were talking, and with the market being so hot right now, it might be a good time to sell. We could help you find a nice condo, something more manageable. We'll talk about that, I said. Come sit in the dining room. She followed me, heels clicking on the hardwood. Saw the setup and paused. Oh, this looks serious. It is. Lucas arrived 10 minutes late, parked on the street and walked up slowly, like a man approaching his execution. He looked terrible, unshaven, eyes red, wearing clothes that he'd slept in. When he came inside, he barely looked at me. Let's get this over with, he said. Sit down, I told them both. They sat on the far side of the table, side by side, facing me. Chloe kept her pleasant smile fixed in place. Lucas slouched in his chair, arms crossed, defensive. I looked at them for a long moment. My children, the babies I'd carried and birthed and raised, the toddlers I'd stayed up with through fevers and nightmares, the teenagers I'd driven to school and games and parties, the adults I'd helped through breakups and job losses, and every crisis that seemed insurmountable until I fixed it. Thank you for coming, I said quietly. Chloe's smile widened. Of course. We've been wanting to talk about this. I know Dad had some life insurance, and there's the house, and his retirement accounts. Brian and I talked to a financial advisor and... Stop, I said. She stopped, looking confused. Before we discuss the inheritance, I need to show you something. I opened the first folder, pulled out the medical bills and spread them across the table. Do you know what these are? They both leaned forward slightly. Lucas picked up one of the bills, scanned it, put it down. medical stuff. From Dad. From Dad's treatment, I said. From the cardiac rehabilitation program he needed after his first heart attack. From his cardiologist appointments. From his prescriptions, all of which stopped being paid 6 months before he died. Chloe frowned. But you guys had insurance. Insurance covered 60%. We were responsible for the rest. $8,000 for the rehab program, $6,000 for the cardiologist, $1,200 in prescription copays. All of it went unpaid. Why didn't you pay it? Lucas asked, and there was accusation in his voice, like this was somehow my fault. Because we didn't have the money. I opened the second folder, pulled out the bank statements. Because your father gave $60,000 to Lucas over the course of a year. Because Lucas maxed out a credit card in our name for another $28,000. Because Chloe took $15,000 for her office space 3 months before your father died. Silence. They both stared at the papers. That's over $100,000, I said. Money that was supposed to be for retirement, for emergencies, for medical care. All of it gone. All of it given to you. He offered to help, Lucas said, but his voice was weak. He did. Because he loved you. Because he couldn't stand to see you struggle. Even when helping you meant he had to stop his own treatment. Even when it meant skipping medication that kept him alive. Chloe's face had gone pale. Mom, we didn't know... Didn't you? I pushed Mark's handwritten note across the table. He called you, Lucas. Told you he needed help paying for the rehab program. You said you'd have the money next month. You never did. The business was struggling. I was trying... You were buying $1,000 dinners and staying in luxury hotels. I've seen the credit card statements. Every charge, every cash advance. You were living like a rich man on money borrowed from a dying father. Lucas stood up. That's not fair. You don't understand the pressure I was under. Sit down. My voice cracked like a whip and he actually flinched. Sat back down slowly. I turned to Chloe. And you, hanging up on your father when he said no, making him feel guilty until he gave you money he couldn't afford. Money that should have kept him alive. I didn't know he was that sick. He had a heart attack 18 months ago. You visited him in the hospital once, and then disappeared until you needed money again. That's not true. When did you last visit him before he died? When was the last time you had dinner here, or called just to talk, or gave a damn about anything except what you could get? Chloe's eyes filled with tears. You're being cruel. Cruel? I laughed, and it came out harsh and ugly. Cruel is letting your father die because you couldn't be bothered to check on him. Cruel is skipping his funeral for a party. Cruel is selling his car before his body was cold. Don't you dare talk to me about cruel. They didn't come to his funeral. Now they've come to their own. Lucas recovered first, leaned back in his chair, arms crossed again. Okay, fine, we screwed up. We weren't perfect children, but that doesn't change the fact that there's an inheritance. Dad's life insurance alone was $200,000. The house is worth at least $400,000. His retirement accounts... Are you serious right now? I stared at him. Your father is gone because of you, both of you, and you're sitting here calculating how much money you'll get. It's not like that, Chloe said, wiping her eyes. We're just trying to be practical. Practical? I stood up. You want practical? Here's practical. The life insurance paid out $100,000, not $200,000. Half of it went to pay off the credit card debt Lucas created. The other half went to medical bills and funeral costs. There is no inheritance money. They both went still. The retirement accounts were already depleted. Your father borrowed against them to keep giving you money. What's left will barely cover my own expenses for the next few years. What about the house? Lucas demanded. What about it? It's worth a fortune. When you sell it, we'll get our share. Your share? I laughed again. You think you're entitled to a share of this house that I worked 2 jobs to help pay for, that your father maintained and improved and loved? You think you have any claim to it after what you've done? We're his children. Chloe's voice rose, tears forgotten. We have a legal right. To what? To profit from him being gone? To sell off the only thing I have left of him so you can fund your next business failure, or buy another BMW? Lucas stood up again, hands flat on the table. You can't just cut us out. There are laws. The house is in my name. Has been since we refinanced 10 years ago. Your father signed it over to protect it from his medical debt. It's mine. Entirely mine. You have no legal claim to any of it. That's ridiculous. Lucas slammed his fist on the table. Mark's mug jumped. You planned this. You're trying to take our inheritance. Your inheritance? I picked up the folder of medical bills and threw it at him. Papers scattered across the table, across the floor. Your father needed one signed form. One goddamn form from you authorizing payment for his rehab. That's all it would have taken. But you were too busy, too important, too focused on your fake business to care. Chloe grabbed for some of the papers, tried to gather them up like she could somehow contain what was happening. Stop it, stop yelling. We can work this out. There's nothing to figure out. I swept Mark's photo off the table. It hit the floor with a crack, glass spider webbing. He's gone. Your father is gone, and you are the reason. Not by your hands, but by your greed, your selfishness, and your complete inability to think of anyone but yourselves. We didn't cause this, Chloe screamed. He had a heart attack. That's not our fault. He had a heart attack because he couldn't afford his medication, because he was stressed about money, because you bled him dry and left him with nothing. Lucas came around the table toward me. You're insane. You're having some kind of breakdown. We should have seen this coming. Don't. I held up one hand. Don't come near me. Or what? You'll throw another towel at me. You'll call the neighbors. You're pathetic, old and alone and angry at the world because your precious husband is gone. Well, guess what, Mum? People die. That's life. And we're not going to let you destroy our relationship with you just because you need someone to blame. Your relationship with me? I stared at him. We don't have a relationship. We haven't had one in years. You tolerated me when I was useful, when I could give you money or advice or clean up your messes. Now that I can't, now that I won't, you don't need me anymore. That's not true, Chloe said, but it sounded hollow. It is true. And you know what? I don't need you either. I don't need your fake concern or your calculated visits or your phone calls asking for favors. I don't need children who treat me like an ATM with a pulse. Lucas's face went red. You're a bitter old woman who can't accept that we have our own lives. We're not your babies anymore. We're adults with responsibilities. Responsibilities? I picked up the check register from the table, held it up. Your responsibility was to care about your father, to visit him, to help him when he needed it. You couldn't manage that. You couldn't manage the bare minimum of human decency. He grabbed the register out of my hands. I tried to hold on to it, but he was stronger, yanked it away. The binding ripped, pages scattered. Give that back. No, you're using this to manipulate us, to make us feel guilty. You should feel guilty. I grabbed his wrist, tried to get the register back. He pulled away and I stumbled forward. Chloe screamed. Lucas shoved me backward, not hard enough to hurt, but hard enough to send me stumbling into the table. The mug fell to the floor and shattered. Mark's photo crunched under my foot. Don't touch me, I shouted. Then keep your hands off me. Lucas threw the register at the wall. It hit and fell, pages spreading across the floor like evidence at a crime scene. We're done here. Come on, Chloe. Wait. Chloe looked between us, face pale, mascara running. Mom, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. We didn't mean for any of this to happen. We didn't know. You didn't want to know, I said quietly. That's different. Please, can we just talk about this? Work something out? No. I straightened up, looked at both of them. My children, my failures. No, we can't. Lucas grabbed Chloe's arm. Let's go. She's lost it. But I wasn't done. Not yet. Here's your inheritance, I said. My voice was calm now, steady. All the screaming was out of me, burned away, leaving something cold and clear behind. My house, my name, my silence. I'm taking them all back. Lucas stopped at the doorway. What are you talking about? I'm talking about the fact that you're not welcome here anymore, either of you. This is my home, my sanctuary, my place, and you've contaminated it with your greed and your lies and your complete lack of respect for the man who gave you everything. You can't just, I am, you're cut off, no more money, no more advice, no more cleaning up your messes, no more pretending we're a family when we stopped being one the day you chose parties and business meetings over your father's funeral. Chloe's face crumpled. Mom, please. I'm changing the locks tomorrow. I'm removing you both as beneficiaries from my will. I'm closing the joint accounts and the credit cards. I'm erasing every legal and financial connection we have. And then I'm going to forget I ever had children. You'll regret this, Lucas said, and now there was venom in his voice. You'll get old and sick and alone, and you'll have no one. No one to take care of you. No one to visit you. No one to give a damn when you die. Good, I smiled. It felt strange on my face, like muscles I hadn't used in years. Because I'd rather die alone than live with the shame of raising people like you. Silence. Heavy and absolute. Chloe was crying again, full-on sobbing now. Lucas's jaw worked like he was trying to find words that wouldn't come. I walked to the front door and opened it. Rain had started again, light but steady. The sky was the color of old concrete. Out, I said. Mom! Chloe tried one more time. Out! My voice echoed through the house, through the empty rooms and hollow spaces, through the years of disappointment and betrayal and love that had curdled into something unrecognizable. Lucas grabbed Chloe and pulled her toward the door. She stumbled in her heels, still sobbing. When they passed me, Lucas looked right at me, and for a second I saw something in his eyes. Not remorse, not understanding, but something like fear. Like he'd finally realized what he'd lost, and it was too late to get it back. They went out into the rain. Chloe turned back once, mouth open like she wanted to say something, but no words came. Then they were walking to their cars, Lucas's hand on Chloe's elbow, holding her up. I stood in the doorway and watched them go. Watched them get into separate cars. Of course they'd driven separately, couldn't even coordinate that much. Watched the engine start and the headlights come on. Watched them drive away, first Lucas, then Chloe, taillights disappearing into the grey afternoon. The rain fell harder, soaked my threshold, my doormat with its cheerful "welcome" printed on faded fabric. Soaked the walk where Mark used to shovel snow every winter. Soaked the driveway where he'd taught both kids to ride bikes, running behind them with his hands on their shoulders, promising not to let go until they were ready. I stood in the doorway and listened as the rain erased their steps. The sweetest sound I'd ever heard. Then I closed the door, locked it, put my back against it and slid down until I was sitting on the floor, knees up, arms wrapped around them. My hands were trembling. My whole body was trembling. But it wasn't fear. It wasn't weakness. It was release. I sat there as the light faded outside, as the house grew dark around me. Didn't get up to turn on lamps. Didn't move at all. Just sat and breathed and felt the weight of 30 years lifting off my shoulders, piece by piece, until I could finally breathe all the way down to the bottom of my lungs. They were gone. I was free. In the dining room, Mark's photo lay on the floor, glass shattered. I could see his face through the cracks, still smiling, still believing in family, still thinking love was enough. I'm sorry, I whispered to him. I'm sorry I couldn't save you, but I saved myself. The rain drummed on the roof. The house creaked and settled. Somewhere down the street, a dog barked. I pulled my knees tighter to my chest and closed my eyes.